Now that you understand the elements of a documentary and how they're used to tell a good story, let's take another look at Houdini in action. In this first section, you'll see footage that Houdini's original audiences might never have seen. Watch carefully and notice how the narration explains what you see.
1905. Houdini was a genuine star now as he moved with his wife and mother into a 26-room townhouse in Harlem. He wasn't home for long. Determined to remain a headliner, he perfected the packing crate escape. A perfectly ordinary crate would be nailed shut and dropped into a body of water. What the crowds couldn't see and didn't suspect was the small pair of nail cutters Houdini carried with him. As the crate sank, he quickly cut enough nails to loosen a few of the boards. Still holding his breath, he would squeeze out through the gap he had made and then refix the loosened boards.
How much of Houdini's secret does the footage show? What part of the secret would you not have learned if there were no voiceover narration? In this next segment, you'll watch an interview with a magic historian. What do you learn about Houdini from the interview and from the footage?
And both Houdini and the box would emerge intact. It stunned the crowd every time.
I mean, really what Houdini was doing, he was acting out death and resurrection. In the Egyptian myth, wasn't Osiris locked up in a box and thrown into the Nile? And it's not too far away from what Houdini was doing every day of his life.
Based on the interview and the footage, what impression of Houdini do you think the filmmakers want you to have? Next, you'll watch footage from Houdini's publicity film.
Another certain crowd pleaser was the straitjacket escape, which Houdini pioneered. He had become fascinated by straitjackets on a visit to an insane asylum. This publicity film shows how theatrical the act was, but the escape took very real study, strength, and concentration.
What about this footage do you think would have captured the attention of Houdini's audience? As the act continues, listen carefully to the music chosen by the documentary filmmakers. Think about how the music affects your reaction to the footage.
At first, Harry did the escape hidden in a cabinet, but he soon realized the power of shedding the jacket in full view.
Describe the music. Why do you think the filmmaker chose to play it over this footage? Houdini amazed crowds with this next trick, but he had another motive as well. Listen closely for details provided by the voiceover narration.
The straitjacket escape was wonderful publicity for the rest of Harry's act. In every town, he could guarantee he'd fill every seat in the theater by first performing the straitjacket escape outside, free of charge, not on a stage, but suspended upside down above the crowd. Life stopped as huge numbers of people came to watch.
According to the voiceover, why did Houdini perform the straitjacket escape for free? As the footage of Houdini's stunt continues, notice at what point the voiceover stops and the music continues.
In a number of towns, the police reported that pickpockets had a field day, since everyone else was staring up at Houdini mesmerized. Still, the escape always thrilled the crowd.
Why might the filmmakers have let the music play without the voiceover during the footage of Houdini's escape? In the following segment, watch for a different kind of footage, a newspaper clipping from Houdini's day.
He would draw crowds of 50,000. 50,000 people are late to work and their bosses say, why? And they say, well, Houdini was getting out of a straitjacket.
And with his natural genius for publicity, Houdini often performed the act suspended from the local newspaper office, thus ensuring front-page coverage.
What does this newspaper clipping add to the documentary and to your understanding of Houdini's stunt? As the documentary continues, listen closely to the story told in the interview. Think about what the footage and music add to the story.
Another sensation was Houdini's escape from a milk can filled with water. Handcuffed, he would be submerged in the can, and the lid would be locked on.
He would say before he went into the milk can, "When you see me take a breath and submerge my body beneath the water, just before the lid is locked on, I want all of you in the audience to draw that same breath. Hold it as long as you possibly can, and when you are forced to let out that breath, at that point you would commence drowning." Now, that's an enormously effective gimmick, because people in the audience would take their breath in, and then when they got blue in the face and had to let out, they'd say, "The can is still sitting there and he hasn't budged. He must be drowning now unless he can do it much longer than I can." And then time would go by, another minute, another 2 minutes, another 3 minutes. They say, "By now, he surely is drowning." And they empathize so strongly, people would be shouting in the audience, "Let him out, let him out." And then suddenly, bang, he would bust through the front of the curtain, dripping wet and heaving his breath very, very deeply, because he'd wanted to give them the impression that he had just that second emerged from the... He might have been out for 3 minutes already. He would get a standing ovation on that each and every time, without fail.
What techniques do the filmmakers use to recreate the tension and anxiety Houdini's audience must have felt before he emerged from the milk can? The documentary concludes with a backstage glimpse of Houdini, as told by a knowledgeable source. What does this interview tell you about Houdini's personality?
In fact, Harry was really safely inside an inner can, and half rivets on the outer can allowed him to escape. He'd then sit backstage and read the local newspaper until he felt it was time to make his dramatic reappearance. But on at least one occasion, he ran the risk of being caught.
The newspaper was being turned so loudly that one of his assistants came up to the side and said, "Harry, turn the pages quieter, the audience can hear you." And Houdini said, "I'm not finished yet. Tell the orchestra to play louder."
The focus of this documentary is on Houdini's career and his famous tricks. What other parts of the magician's life could the filmmakers have instead chosen to focus on? Given that the purpose of a documentary is to entertain and inform viewers, do you think the filmmakers chose a good focus? Why or why not?